Thank you for joining us today. We have a really exciting forum for you today for our Friday forum, The Usefulness of Unions. Just a quick overview of our agenda, the welcome, that's what we're doing right now. After that, we're going to go into a quick networking opportunity. If you haven't been on one of our Friday forums before, I'm just going to put you all in breakout rooms for a couple minutes, let you guys chat and get to know each other. We'll have a prompt to get you started if you need it. After that, we'll come back and we will have our speaker. We have a special guest today, Andrew Hutchinson from Laborers Local 955. A little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. Today we have with us Andrew Hutchinson from Laborers Local 955. Please excuse me, I am getting over a little bit of a cold, so my voice is not doing the best, but I want to read a little bit about Andrew here for you. He currently serves as the union representative and the organizing director of Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 955. LIUNA Local 955 is a union of workers fighting for better wages and working conditions in mid-Missouri. Members work at the City of Centralia, City of Columbia, Boone County Road and Bridge, University of Missouri Columbia, University of Missouri Kansas City, MU Healthcare, Truman State, City of Kirksville, and MFA Feed Mills in Mexico and Kirksville, and Wildcat Materials. Hutchinson holds a master's in social work with a concentration in social and economic development from Washington University, and graduated with bachelor's degrees in history and sociology at the University of Missouri Columbia. He has previously worked as the government affairs coordinator for LIUNA Local 110 and served as the founding Mid-Missouri organizer for the Mid-Missouri chapter of Missouri Jobs with Justice. He lives in his hometown of Columbia, Missouri with his wife, Mackenzie, and his daughter, Elliot Kay. Andrew, thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my slides so that you can start sharing yours.
Great. Give me 1 second while I get this going. Share screen. All right. So it's going to be a little bit different today. So what I'm going to share is what we give to new hires at the City of Columbia as part of the orientation process. Because this is supposed to take people just getting hired through the steps of understanding what our local is, what we do, and eventually make the pitch for membership. So I'm going to jump around a little bit so we can have a good amount of time for Q&A. So as was said earlier, listed at the bottom of that slide is all the different places we represent. Our local is, we're very lucky or unlucky, depending on who you're talking to. We have basically every type of unionized worker. So we have open shop in the public sector. We have closed shop, as in, you know, your run-of-the-mill feed mill factory workers who make livestock feed. And then we also have the hiring hall relationship with our construction workers. So we have between 500 and 600 members, depending on the day. There's constant turnover with the positions that we represent. So basically who we are is that I work as a staff member for the workers at all of those listed locations. We're custodians, cooks, people who pick up trash, solid waste workers, CDL drivers and operators, bus drivers, city and county workers, construction and maintenance workers. There are dozens and dozens of job titles, from everything of the people who take care of horses at the university to high voltage electricians. So there's a lot of different positions that we represent. So we like to talk about rights as a union member. This is the rights that folks at the city, just working at the city, have, that are different from a normal Missouri workplace. So just cause is one of these big protections that, in the state of Missouri and in most states in this country, we have what's called at-will employment, which means that, you can get fired at any time, at any moment. In places with a solid union contract, you could only be fired for what's called just cause, which basically means that management has to prove that they've done things correctly, given you proper notice. And even when they do discipline you or terminate you in a union contract, you have the ability to appeal it. A lot of people talk about unions in this sense of we show up for workers. In some cases, people describe my job as an attorney or a social worker. I am neither, but do those type of things. This is an example of, you can see what the minimum starting wages for some of the positions that we represent were last year. So I show this to folks that we had people starting at, $13.07 an hour in their pay scale. And as a result of negotiations, we negotiated a true minimum of $15 an hour. And in some cases, people received raises of $15,000. We got Veterans Day as a holiday, more vacation. Some folks got everyone got a minimum 6% raise, but in some cases that came out to significantly more than a 6% raise. More paid family leave, we've won at the city level, as well as better funeral leave, step scale, and then this was a big one as well, which was the elimination of pre-employment drug testing for marijuana. A lot of folks who didn't need to drive for work, despite marijuana being legal, the city was still testing every single applicant and using that as a basis to not hire someone. And if you failed on a pre-employment drug test, the city would actually deny you ever being able to take a job again at the city for 5 years. So we have a lot of folks that we're still working on who are still caught in this. I have people who literally applied for a job. They're custodians currently at the university. So they're one of our members at the university. They've now applied for a job in solid waste at the city. And because they tested positive for marijuana 2 years ago in a pre-employment test, they're still barred from city employment for 3 years. When we don't have enough workers to staff where we are. So a lot of our work is getting rid of cumbersome policies that inhibit the ability of good public services to be carried out, whether that be through management just not wanting to do it, or there's a corporation that's profiting from it. That's what we do. The policies that we advocate on in contract negotiations or at the legislative level come directly from the membership. Pre-employment drug testing came out because we had too many folks trying to get their family members on to get a good job who would test positive for weed, even if they had a medical card, and be denied employment at the city. We get really clear here with folks. Sometimes even messaging that's trying to be good about unions. We'll talk about how, look what my union did for me, and they hold up this wage increase, or they hold up vacation time or health insurance. What we have to be really clear with is that we are not a service. Their stewards, their bargaining surveys, their negotiation teams are elected by their coworkers. All I do is give people the tools and training and strategies to win. I do negotiate the contract, but the actual proposals that I negotiate are 100% from the membership. One of the examples I use when talking to new members about this and new bargaining unit members is we actually, at the city of Centralia, we're going into negotiations next year on this for their contract of their 13 people who work for the city. A huge issue for them is that they actually want to shorten their lunch break from 1 hour to 30 minutes, which is not something you're usually bargaining for. And I asked them why, and they said their number one issue is that most of them have livestock and farm chores at home. And if they can get off work 30 minutes early, that's an additional 30 minutes of daylight um, for them to get those chores done. To which uh, they assumed I would have just known that. And I was really clear with them. I was like, no, I grew up in Columbia. I grew up at a computer store. I've never worked with livestock of any kind. It's not my life. But that's why you don't write proposals for people. And that's why you don't do things for people. You help them win what they need. So the rules at work, this is of less interest to folks on this call. But what I wanted to show is these are our members who took part in a social media day of action. So bus drivers, um, solid waste workers, and mechanics, all taking part in a social media day of action so that we could pressure the city to give us better raises. Same with this next picture. This describes a little bit more how just cause works, which we don't need to get into a massive discussion of just cause, but this is community members and workers in January picketing to stop transit cuts at the city in January of last year. So they came and stood out in the cold because bus routes are being combined in the city of Columbia, which hurts our workers because it shorts the amount of hours that they can work, and it hurts community members, especially the unhoused community who rely on transit for transportation, but also in the supremely hot and cold months, essentially as mobile warming and cooling shelters in Columbia. So basically, what we do is these are things that we remind folks at the end of the orientation is employees are often subject, especially employees in low wage jobs, are subject to extremely harsh disciplinary procedures. I've had employees who have been written up for nothing. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example. I had an employee who was written up because his supervisor told him every single time you use the floor scrubber as a custodian, you need to call me, because he didn't believe him that he was using it. Every time this employee would finish doing this, he would call his supervisor and say, hey, I just finished using the floor scrubber. The supervisor walked up on him using the floor scrubber and said, why didn't you call me? And he said, well, I always call you when I'm done. And he wrote him up right then and there. And in a progressive discipline, the write-ups very quickly lead to a suspension and termination. And so we had to line up all the paperwork, all the reasons why that's not something that you can write someone up for. We also discovered, even though we have a union contract, when there's departments that folks are not active in enforcing it, things can go by the wayside. And one of the most egregious examples was that the folks who operate the heavy machinery at the landfill to push things into the landfill they're supposed to get 2 15-minute breaks in addition to their lunch. And they hadn't had those breaks for 8 years. Since that one of the members I signed had been there, he said, we've never taken a 15-minute break. The only break we've ever been allowed is our lunch break. Which, I mean, if you're operating heavy equipment with all that noise, and you know that if your phone buzzes and you're even caught checking it, even if you're not currently in operation, that you can be written up for it. It's a pretty big change just to get those 15-minute breaks back. That and building the right to refuse to drive an unsafe vehicle so that folks no longer get hurt driving vehicles that sometimes didn't have functioning brakes for the city of Columbia, and grieving safety violations. These are all things that our union does, or I should say our members do for themselves, because we were able to train them and give them the tools to do it. The way that we win is, of course, by folks taking action and also paying union dues. So Earlier, I talked about how our local has every type of union member, and you heard me use the term open shop. For folks who aren't aware of what that means, you may have heard the law of right to work. We defeated this a couple of years back. I helped work on that campaign. So, what right to work means is that um, if you get a job at a union represented place where your pay and benefits are negotiated, where you have a union steward or a union rep that you can call if discipline happens or whatever. Um, the way it works, for instance, in our feed mill, is that as a condition of employment, you have to either be a member or just pay union dues for the cost of representation. So, for us, that's like at the feed mills, it's $25 a month. So it's not very much. But what that does is that it pays for the lawyer fees, for instance, for the two potential arbitrations we're looking at this year. So those 17 employees pay $25 a month each. And we're doing an arbitration in the next couple of months that could potentially get each of them thousands of dollars in back pay. Arbitrations can run sometimes $6,000 per arbitration. Uh, so you can see that, if you've been collecting those dues for years and years and years and years, then you can take a $6,000 hit. What right to work does is that it allows, it forces you to opt into paying dues, which then means that instead of folks dealing with, oh, my wages and benefits aren't good enough, it's my boss who sets them. What it does is that it reduces the amount of finances which is power, that the collective workers have, and it gets workers arguing with each other about who is a freeloader, who isn't, even though it's, pennies here or there. What it does, and I see this happen in where we do have a right to work, which is all city, county government workers in the state of Missouri and federally. You get folks who start to bicker with each other about, hating the people who they can't convince to opt in to pay union dues. And what that does is it dilutes the responsibility of the boss for paying good wages and treating its workers right. And it pits us against each other. And eventually, if no one pays dues, obviously, right, then the ability of business to be carried out, for my job to be supported, for instance, disappears. So it's kind of a vicious cycle where people can be convinced to not pay dues to the union because they're not strong enough and not getting anything. But by continuing to not pay dues, you're depriving it of the oxygen that it needs to flourish. And this slide is about what dues actually pay for. None of it union dues, in most cases, can never be given to political candidates. That's always a big myth. A small portion of our dues goes to the international, but most of it is just for rent, paying my health insurance, paying my cost, and my salary is rated at what a skilled laborer makes in construction. So I think you'll find that a lot of union staffers, depending on the local, are rated at what their members make. And our dues for the public sector max out at $40 a month. That is the most anyone will ever pay in union dues. And then this is where we make the pitch for folks to join our union. So I'm going to stop screen sharing because that's pretty much the thing of our presentation. The only additional things I have is that presentation is geared on the nuts and bolts of what we do and has to be given under the auspices of city management watching over our shoulder. The other thing that we do is we run direct action campaigns to try to force employers to do the right thing. So an example of that is a couple of years back, right when COVID started, the university attempted to outsource 300 custodians and landscapers. They would have all lost their jobs, lost their benefits, right when the pandemic started. And we ran a campaign during COVID direct action campaign to drive bad press and eventually force the university to not outsource custodians and landscapers, and those folks still have their jobs today. We also have been active politically in the city of Columbia on a very similar issue, which folks were continually trying to drum up support to outsource solid waste. And we were able to make that not a reality to protect those workers' jobs and benefits. So that's what I got. Happy to touch on anything else that folks would find helpful.
And just a couple things from Empower Missouri. We did have a weekly perspective on unions. If you haven't read it, I'm going to put the link in the chat because that was full of some more good information. I also want to let everybody know about our coalitions. If you are not already a member, we do convene statewide coalitions on housing, food security, and community justice. There's some information about meetings there, and those can all be found on our website. And also we invite everybody to sign up for our newsletter. You'll hear about our upcoming Friday forums, other events that we do. Everything there is sent out to our email list. A couple specific things to highlight. Our next Friday forum is a special one. It is our preview of the upcoming legislative session. So our staff will preview legislation that's already been filed, what we're hoping to be filed, what we will be actively working on in the January session. That is on December 8th, and you can register for that on our website. Again, I will put that in the chat in just a second, or Nichelle, if you can drop some of those links in the chat, that would be great. And then the last thing, we do have a survey. We do these for every Friday forum, and they kind of help us plan for the next one, for upcoming ones. Your feedback is really important as we do that. What you like and dislike, any ways we can improve and make these events a little better for you. I will put that in the chat too. Oh, Nichelle already did that too. And that is it from us. That's just our contact information. You can always reach out to anyone on our staff if you have any questions. We do have a few more minutes. So if you guys can go ahead and click on that link, take that survey. We'll put the other links we were talking about in the chat. And if anybody wants to hop off mute or put in the chat any more last questions for Andrew or for any of our staff, we are also happy to do that.